in both types, design and content, took a nosedive and now is slowly coming back, and I expect there to be some customization of design, but really an extensive customization of content. That content customization is going to be the place where you're going to see the most change over the next period of time. So when you customize your content with XML, what you have the ability to do is set up a large number of variations. And in fact, it's possible now to set up labels such that the number of variations is very, very large or essentially unlimited. If I make it user configurable what somebody is going to see, then I don't need to control ahead of time the 4 versions or the 6 versions, and that's really the difference. Now we are allowing people to choose for themselves what they want to see, which means they get a very, very large possible number of variations. We then filter the content when the user requests the information instead of when it's being published. So again, with my newspaper and my editions, the newspaper staff is deciding ahead of time that the state edition will get this information and the county edition will get this slightly different information. With XML, what you can do is turn that model on its head and have the user decide when they request information what they want to see. You can also create multidimensional conditions, so things like filter by customer and also by platform. So I want to see all the stories that are in a particular county that are related to police information. And if you have information tagged with XML, it should be able to do that. Now I wanted to step back for a second to the question of newspapers and the printing press. This particular newspaper, which is out of Holland, they compete with a couple of other newspapers for the title of first newspaper ever. You'll notice they have a date there of 1656, which would be about 200 years post-Gutenberg. There were apparently some others, but I think their claim to fame is that they published on a regular basis, or possibly a daily basis. So this is an image of this newspaper out of Haarlem in the Netherlands. And the thing to take away from this is this newspaper is now available online only. They made the shift to online a couple of years ago. So the question to me is, what sort of unpredictable or unpredicted things will XML bring to us? Nobody predicted newspapers when the printing press came along. So what are we going to see that we're not yet anticipating, that we haven't yet thought about? And I have 3 of them here that I want to touch on. One is integrated content. What I mean by this is information that is presented to the end user from a variety of sources, but is presented as an organized whole thing. So instead of information being out of a user manual, and information being out of help, and information being out of forums, and information coming off a blog, that you would have a stream of information that's presented to you all at once or in some sort of an integrated manner that pulls it all together. There's also another way of looking at this, which is that XML would be the source for numerous different kinds of content destinations. An example of this would be error messages for software. If you have a set of error messages for software, those could be, if you had an XML file that contains them, that could be the source code for the software itself for the error message, but it could also be the source for technical content for an error message document or appendix that also provides troubleshooting information. And so in that case, the XML content would be the source for 2 different destinations that are really quite different and today generally not integrated. Many-to-many publishing. This is the idea that anybody can be a publisher, anybody can have a blog, anybody can contribute on a forum. And because of the fact that XML makes it much easier to slice and dice and manage information, we do expect that XML will lead to the rise of more many-to-many publishing. And in fact, XML in many cases is underneath, as a technology, is underneath some of the forums and wikis and other things. So I expect that XML will be a backbone there. It may not be visible to you, but it will be out there. And then, of course, the question is, will there be new publication types that we haven't thought of yet? One thing that certainly is out there that's interesting is ebooks. And I'm not the greatest Microsoft apologist out there in the world, but I did want to point out something that Bill Gates said at some point. He thought that e-books may actually result in improving literacy and education in less developed countries. And think back to 1452 when books were rare and scarce and expensive and impossible to get, and somebody who had a book was wealthy, and a monastery that had 100 books or 1,000 books was just rich indeed. And today, most of us probably have that many books in our house. So Bill Gates, back in 1999, pointed out that today, people in poor countries cannot afford to buy books and rarely have access to a library. So this is exactly the situation that we had in 1452, that books were expensive and inaccessible. And his argument is that perhaps e-books will improve literacy and education in less developed countries because they will be accessible and inexpensive. It's also worth noting, as a slight tangent to this, that the expectation is that in developing countries, the first form of connectivity will be mobile, not wired. So where we have today in the West, we have phone lines and then cell phones. What is expected will happen in developing countries is that the cell phones will be there first. And it is in fact possible now to read books on cell phones. It's not a lot of fun, but it can be done. And if the trade-off is that that's how you get access to books, if otherwise you would not have that access, then perhaps you would gladly trade the experience of reading it on a book for the ability to actually see that book. So stepping back to the printing press, it took about 50 years to make the transition from custom books, which were really an implementation of printing press technology to produce the same kind of experience as the handwritten manuscripts. It's pretty clear in looking at Gutenberg Bibles that they were trying to still customize, trying to still have it be commissioned and appropriate for a single individual, that that person got what they were looking for. It took about 50 years to make that transition to mass-produced books. It took about 150 years for newspapers to come along. And so, therefore, the question for us, of course, is what will XML bring us? It was invented in 1995. After 14 years, according to our research, we have approximately 30% uptake or adoption for technical content. So